Okay, this time I'm extremely hopeful that everything works out. Okay, so let's see. I hope other people can really see the screen here. I hope this is significantly large enough. I'm just curious if other people are going to be coming in shortly. So for those of you who are unaware, I went 12 minutes into the first time that I tried to broadcast this class, and as it turns out, that seemed to shut out without warning after around 12 minutes, and now this time we're going again and hoping for better results. And so it's interesting, this is the third time today I'm actually giving this class, and I wonder if I'll have to give it another 4 times, but in any case, I do know that sometimes there has to be some variety of commitment that one has to undergo in order to achieve fantastic results. All right, so good. Hello, Charles. Can you see the screen well enough? Can you hear me well enough? Let me know. Everything all right? No, yes? Yes, no? All right, great. Today is the extraordinary beginning of a new era. My name is Jared, and today we are going to adventure into the road less traveled, into the wonderful world of endangered languages. And so here we are for, what is me, the third time today, how to learn an endangered language, the rewards and obstacles for learning languages currently under threat. Thanks to Jimmy Mello and Polyglots, the community, for having made the Polyglot Congress in February 2018 a fantastic reality. So let's go ahead and look at the next page. So perhaps you're curious, what exactly are we going to be doing today? So here's what we're learning today. What is an endangered language? This is the primarily most important question. Then what sort of reasons do people have for learning endangered languages? Is learning an endangered language to fluency possible? And the short answer is, don't worry about it, yes. And the reasons why some people think it isn't can be debunked. Because some people think that maybe learning an endangered language to fluency, certainly if you're outside of the region where it is spoken, some people believe that that is not possible, and I'm going to lay forth my opinion as to why I think that is not true. If you want to learn an endangered language, where do you look and how do you begin? What makes learning an endangered language different from learning a global language like German or Mandarin, or a safe national language like Bulgarian or Somali? What traps do learners of endangered languages fall into, and how can you avoid them? Can learning an endangered language as an outsider help keep the language alive? And the short answer is, do not worry, yes. Ways you can help preserve endangered languages even if you have no intention to learn them. So let's go ahead as to a little bit about myself. So who am I and why did I decide to make this presentation one fine day? So one thing you really should know is that I'm actually one of very few online polyglots whose first fluent language as an adult was an endangered language, and that was Yiddish. Was the first language I learned to fluency as an adult, and it still is a very tremendously important language to me. This year actually marks 10 years of me actually being a Yiddish speaker, and I'm so grateful every single day for that opportunity. It truly has enabled me to understand American culture significantly better, understand the story of my people significantly better. So I am Ashkenazi Jewish, for those of you who are unaware. Next, another journey of mine with another endangered language, Greenlandic. You can actually see a picture of me in Greenland on the left side there. That is a Getua, which is the, it's the Greenlandic Culture House. It's a bit like a movie theater plus cultural arts performance space and a cafe all thrown into one. And I think it was actually built to really resemble a wave. And in the background, you can actually see very, very icy roads. I visited there in October 2017. Obviously, not a lot of people visit Greenland at that time of year. And so as a result of really having discovered this language, I really, really fell in love. And this ultimately led to me creating an RPG set of contemporary Greenland, and that was Kaverini Nuke Adventures, and that's due for release later this year. In some of my previous interviews that are found on YouTube, I said that it was coming on 2017. It has been delayed, but it will be happening, and it is a fantastic adventure about cute animals, about history, culture, and salvation of the world, and of course, Inuit. Who doesn't like them? Okay, some endangered languages I speak fluently, such as Yiddish. Others I've forgotten, such as Northern Sami. Others I plan to learn later this year, such as Tuvaluan in the spring. And others I use primarily in a passive context, such as Cornish. I also speak a host of other languages that are less commonly taught, such as the host of Creole languages from Oceania. I've tried to get enthusiastic about global languages, but, part of me always feels a detachment to most of them. My passion is always with the little guy. And in all honesty, it's okay if you feel that way or if you don't feel that way, because that's truly what makes all of us members of a polyglot community with lots of internal dialogue and curiosity, and yes, healthy arguments. Okay, so now as to the next question, what is an endangered language? This is primarily important, and on the right-hand side here, we actually have an UNESCO's Atlas of the World's Languages in Danger. And so the white pins indicate a vulnerable language, which means that the younger generation may, or possibly, probably is, losing interest in using that language in their primary daily lives in favor of another more powerful language. The red pins indicate critically endangered, which usually means that most speakers are senior citizens, and that even among them, the language is falling out of use. Black indicates a dead language with no native speakers remaining, and then orange and yellow represent severely endangered and definitely endangered languages, respectively. In a handful of cases, I believe only like about 4 that I can think of, possibly more, you may see the pins marked with an R, indicating that they were revived. We're going to get into that momentarily. So what is an endangered language? Let's go ahead and return to that question. So throughout the world, we've had empires and states that seek to impose their culture and way of life on others. So throughout creation of many, if not in fact all of these states, 2 things tend to happen. 1, sometimes governments actively suppress languages that they see as a barrier towards unifying their nation or consolidating their supremacy. And then 2, some people raise their children to speak another, more powerful language better, so that their descendants have more economic opportunities, don't get teased in school, fit in better, etc. And as an American myself, I've actually really noticed both not only among my Yiddish-speaking heritage, which I'm going to get into literally on the next slide, but also among the genocide of the Native American peoples, which, not only was there very much physical annihilation of many of these peoples as well, but many people who managed to survive that stage after being put on reservations and treated significantly badly. They were often put in schools very much sponsored by the American government, and one thing that happened was that they would be beaten in the event that they did anything relating to their ancestral traditions, or if they spoke their ancestral language as well. Not also to mention that even when these patterns did not exist anymore, many elderly people who still spoke these languages had such painful memories of that time that they didn't want to teach the language to their children as well. And so what we're going to encounter right now are a host of endangered languages that I've learned throughout my life, and yes, many of them have very, very sad stories. But also, despite that, there's a significant amount of hope as well. And so here's the list of endangered languages that I've learned to varying degrees throughout my life and how they fit into this paradigm. And so we have Yiddish, Breton, Cornish, Tuvaluan, the Sami languages, Greenlandic and Faroese, Irish, Welsh, and Scottish Gaelic. Okay, so Yiddish. Here we have Dos Blätterle, which is a Yiddish magazine in Sweden. Sweden is very interesting because it actually is Yiddish is one of their official languages, which means that you can actually access a lot of governmental materials translated into Yiddish. Not also to mention, you have the possibility of casting your ballots in Yiddish as well and filling them out in Yiddish as well. In the United States, a lot of Ashkenazi Jewish immigrants, that is to say from Central Eastern Europe, wanted to learn English instead, and often Yiddish language publications served as a gateway to turn Yiddish speakers into English speakers. Countless young Jews in the United States, interestingly, this does not apply to me, had grandparents who spoke Yiddish but didn't pass it on to their children. Within Israel, Yiddish was actively suppressed in favor of Hebrew until recent decades. The Holocaust Holocaust also wiped out huge swaths of Yiddish culture, especially those whose adherents were poor people. While most Holocaust survivors emigrated primarily to Israel, North America, and areas of the British Commonwealth, Yiddish was seen as largely secondary to the local languages of these places, both among those who stayed and those who moved elsewhere. Okay, so next off we have Breton, and I'm not certain if you can actually see this, but on the left we actually have Nolan Leroy's clip, Trimat de l'Aude, which is a song about the three sailors that will sound instantly familiar if I start humming it to you. Chances are it's probably stuck in your head already if you've heard this tune before. And so note that it's not very visible here, but it has upwards of 9 million views. And some scholars believe that the Breton language, which is spoken in Brittany, which is the area of France directly across the English Channel, has had the very sad distinction of being the one language that fell most quickly in usage. And obviously, again, languages do not die by themselves. This was part of a deliberate government plan in order to turn Brittany into a primarily French-speaking area. And by and large, it seems to have worked. And so right here on the right side, we actually have some quotes from various people associated with French government's institutions, keep in mind in the 20th century. And so I'll read some of these quotes out loud. In the linguistic unity of France, it is necessary that the Breton language disappear. There is no place for regional languages and cultures in a France that must make its mark upon Europe. A rule that I would never bend, not a word of Breton, neither in the class nor at recess. Keep in mind, gentlemen, that you have been put in place only in order to kill the Breton language. Do translators work with endangered languages? Yes. The answer is completely yes. And we're going to go get into that at some point within the second half. Thank you for asking that question, Charles. Okay. Cornish, another Celtic language of Cornwall, which is, well, very interestingly, politically it is within England, but some people within Cornwall don't like that you call it that. But interestingly, the place called Land's End, Penzance, etc., you may have actually heard these places, the pirate accent is very much a Cornish one for multiple reasons that I can't go into right now. And so it's a Celtic language of Cornwall, which is the southwestern portion of England, closely related to Breton, but its vocabulary closer to Welsh in its pronunciation. So it died once, and having had literally no speakers remaining, in part because of the imposition of an English language liturgy on Cornwall as a result of a Reformation. And then you're probably curious, if it died once, then how effectively is there a video game in Cornish on the right side of this page? And so the reason for that is because Henry Jenner wrote a language book called The Handbook of the Cornish Language, and then this book almost single-handedly spawned a revival. And so as a result, now you can actually play Minecraft and listen to Cornish radio, and of course various other popular culture tidbits such as Monty Python and Beatles songs have also been translated into Cornish, and these is all within this millennium. And keep in mind that it was a while ago in which it was actually, its fate was decided once, as colloquial Welsh actually determined that. Manx Gaelic, also according to some sources, also was revived, and having had no native speakers left, and that revival movement came forth. Okay, Tuvaluan, so on the other side of the planet, or the Ellis Islands as they were once called. Former British colony, now independent country in the South Pacific. On the left side, you actually see memorized courses in Tuvaluan that are accessible from the desktop app. And yes, if you have the memorized courses on the desktop app, you can also access them on the phone, but you have to enter the courses first on the desktop. I really wish Memrise would change this. It didn't really used to be this way. Threatened by the presence of English, despite the fact that most Tuvaluans are fluent speakers of the language. And so this is also a trope that we find in many areas of the globe, and also in some areas of the Pacific as well, especially among three islands that caught my attention. So Tokelau and Niue are two islands in the Pacific that are actually overseas dependencies of New Zealand, and so they're self-governing. And they also have their regional languages, but also English is constantly threatening to really push them out, and also government functions, yada yada. And then Rapa Nui, which you may actually know better, is Easter Island, also has very much of a similar situation as well, with Spanish threatening to really push out that language as well. Keep in mind that these languages are spoken by like a few thousand people each, so to some degree numbers really do play significant role in it. Okay, we're going to get into useful stuff you can use to start learning your endangered languages of your dreams very shortly. But first, some other ones, is the Sami languages. They follow a very significant pattern that's close to that of the Native Americans that I discussed previously. And so the Sami languages are spoken in the northern areas of what is now Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia, or Sapmi, as it is called. The respective governments of these places tried to eradicate Sami culture, punish children for speaking these languages, and tried to convert them culturally to their own national standards. Greenlandic, imposition of the Danish language on Greenland once upon a time, with longer-term plans once in place to eradicate the Greenlandic languages permanently. And so thankfully, as a result of the Home Rule, yes, the threat of Danish and also of English is very much present in many regards, and some people a little bit worried that maybe Greenlandic is vulnerable by virtue of the fact that localizers may see Danish or English as the path of least resistance, rather than Greenlandic with its 26-letter words, as you can actually see on the left side. Well, that's actually not 26 letters, but the 26-letter words are not uncommon in Greenlandic. And so there's very much that issue as well. Okay, and then last, probably the most commonly studied of the endangered languages, we have Irish, Welsh, and Scottish Gaelic. And so here we have the flag of the Celtic nations that I also chose to be the background of this PowerPoint presentation. And so keep in mind that we have Galicia on the upper left-hand corner. That's actually, it's a Celtic language, but Galician is 1, a Romance language, 2, available in Google Translate, and 3, safe, which is very, very important. And then the other 3 going clockwise, so starting from Galicia here, then we go Ireland, Scotland, Cornwall, Isle of Man, Wales, Brittany. And so Wales, Brittany, and Cornwall are siblings. They're the Brythonic languages, as I may have discussed earlier. And then the Isle of Man, Scotland, and Ireland have the Gaelic languages, which are Manx, Scottish Gaelic, and Irish, respectively. And so the fact that these are within the developed world obviously does provide a significant advantage by means that people that really use a lot of technology in order to ensure that their languages get a significant fighting chance at continuing to live. We're going to get into that momentarily, but probably you're very curious, what sort of reasons do people have for learning endangered languages? Okay, so reason number 1, cultural heritage, and understanding that their ancestors spoke this language. Even if they don't intend to learn the language to fluency, they can engage with the culture on some grounds and feel connected to it. Some people may even have writings from their ancestors written in that language, or may seek to connect to elderly relatives while they're still living. Altruism, another reason, perhaps wanting to stem the tide of mass language death in some capacity. Some scholars may say that outside learners of endangered languages may not help these situations, but I completely disagree with that notion, and we're going to go ahead and get to that later on in this presentation. Only good news concerning your how do I put it, methods and possibilities to really engage with these. Learning an endangered language has been possible now more than it ever has been in human history. And so you live in a very exciting time. On travel, sometimes you may find yourself somewhere where an endangered language is spoken even by a minority. That is to say, English-speaking areas of Ireland, where many of the signs are bilingual in Irish and English. And for those of you who may have actually been in Dublin's airport, you may actually remember that even if you are hearing primarily English spoken by the staff or also in the terminals, the signs are also in Irish and in English. And I remember when I was there in the mid-2000s that there was the Irish was written in a very, very distinctive bright green font. And so learning such a language, even if it isn't prominently spoken there, may enable you not only to notice things that most travelers don't, but may also give you the usual routines of free drinks and making friends with significant ease. In some places, and Ireland and Brittany both come to mind, you actually sometimes have badges that people actually wear, sometimes of different colors, in order to indicate fluency. The different colors indicate the variety of level that you would speak them in. So for example, if you're in a store in Brittany and then you find someone with the badge, then you can actually engage with them in Breton rather than in French. And so that's something to definitely keep in mind. Business opportunities. Endangered languages are very much a glass cannon in terms of the fact that employment opportunities and freelancing, they can provide you, how do I put it, like a portal to instantly access opportunities and get promotions and what have you. Knowledge of them may not be too appreciated at your local language social, but in the right community, your knowledge of a language like Cornish could mean guaranteed employment. And so, very interestingly, not a lot of people in the world are learning Cornish, certainly not outside of Cornwall in many regards. But interestingly, there are a lot of people in Cornwall who want Cornish-speaking elementary school teachers or Cornish-speaking radio broadcasters. And so as a result, even if you're a non-native speaker, that can actually give you a huge advantage and actually give you a golden key to employment. And so certainly Cornish is not the only language which would offer that opportunity as well. Artistic opportunities, especially in the endangered languages in the developed world, there's an artistic boom in which a lot of independent music, television, and YouTube series are being created. Like I've noticed that somebody said "bore da," good morning in Welsh. It's no longer morning in New York City, but thank you anyhow. To say "diolch yn fawr," I hope I got that right. And very interestingly, putting it into words here, Let's Play videos in Welsh and Greenlandic, and even in Breton sometimes, I've really noticed them really come about. And then, of course, Sami music is becoming ever more popular. And so, as a result, people are really engaging in artistic dimensions with endangered languages. We have Trwy Mataror, which was touched upon earlier. Moana or Vaiana, the well-known Disney film, actually featured songs in Tokelauan, which is a language that has about 3,000 native speakers, in a huge blockbuster film. And of course, 1944 featured Crimean Tartar, and that song won the Eurovision Song Contest in 2016. Learning the language and entering this sphere can guarantee you friends and artistic exposure with significant ease. And so I had studied Spanish and Russian in high school, and I wasn't really fluent in them. But in learning Yiddish in college, one thing that I really noticed was the fact that because the Yiddish sphere was significantly tight-knit, the fact is that there were so many people really wanting to help me up, really wanting to interview me, give me a platform. And so to some degree, really learning an endangered language gives you premium membership privileges in ways that other languages, certainly safe ones, do not offer. And so if you really don't have that opportunity, definitely go ahead and try it out. Okay. And now the big question, is learning an endangered language to fluency possible? And then the short answer is yes. And the reason why some people think it isn't are going to be debunked shortly. And so yes, you can learn an endangered language to fluency, but you will need to significantly increase your volume of study, especially self-study and active activity with the language in order to become better at it. Social media can definitely help. So rehearse with writing, whether that be with comments or diaries, or you can even, for example, start prompts and polyglots to the community if you want. Make videos of yourself speaking it, or even impromptu classes that you can feature on your video channel or on Tumblr. If you have a community nearby that speaks the local language, then you're in luck. For example, I'm in New York City right now. That's where I'm actually talking. It's a place with a lot of secular Yiddishists with whom I can regularly practice that language. In other areas of the world, I may not have that opportunity as often. Like I remember one time I was a language social in Iceland, very interestingly. And, in New York City, I encounter Yiddish speakers with significant ease and not Danish speakers not very often. I understand fully that Danish is not endangered. But obviously in Iceland, it was very much a reverse dynamic in which I was the only Yiddish speaker there. Okay. Language socials in Ireland are more likely to have people who speak Irish to significant degrees than those in North America, even in English-speaking areas of Ireland. The reason why some people believe it isn't possible is because they are attached to this idea that you need the presence of human beings in your life that speak it. Not true anymore with the presence of the internet. And so obviously the presence of human beings helps, but as long as you have native speaker or fluent speaker input, which could very well be voices from radio or people speaking on a screen or in a movie, as long as you have that in both auditory and written forms, no shortage of that on the internet, as well as ways to actively rehearse active skills, that is writing and speaking, which you can do on your own, you can get fluent in anything. Thanks to the internet, it is possible to become conversational or even fluent in a language and go years without meeting native speakers at all. I've done that. I've had several of my friends who have done that. Chances are maybe you, people who are watching that right now, have also done that. And so For an endangered language, however, do be prepared to shell out more time and be more creative in your learning methods. And so remember, you really need to spice it up. And so don't read the same book over and over again. You will need to engage with a lot more varied artistic methods. We're going to get into that later on. All right. Now the list you've all been waiting for. If you want to learn an endangered language, where do you look and how do you begin? Maybe it would probably be wise if I go ahead and I'll copy paste this into the comments right now, so that will be happy. All right, so that's not exactly what I wanted. Okay, all right, I don't have the registered version of the PowerPoint right now, so I can't copy paste it, but I will say everything very, very clearly. First off, the Routledge Colloquial Series are of primary importance, in part because they also, yes, they're books, but the audio available in them is available for free online on their website, probably because they probably couldn't keep up with the plentitude of YouTube pronunciation tutorials. And so as a result, given that people would go to free YouTube rather than pay money for CDs, they really decided to outsource a lot of the audio of their series publicly. And so that's good news for you, because you can actually really learn a lot of pronunciation from that without even having to buy the book. And buying the book is actually really, really helpful. The Live Lingua Project is pretty much the platinum resource for languages from the developing world, especially indigenous languages of South America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Oceania. And so it's pretty much a collection of free PDFs, most of which have been sourced from the Foreign Service Institute and the Peace Corps. And so as a result, they focus primarily on the developing world, which makes them extremely unique. And so if you actually want to learn a language from Sub-Saharan Africa, that is the website you need. A lot of PDFs, a lot of them are very well written, a lot of them are very thorough and really focus on learning to speak them as quickly as possible. Many of them also come with audio as well, which is extremely helpful. For German and French speakers, well, you know what I'm going to say for French speakers, Assimil, no introduction. And then for German speakers, Reis Know-how or Kauderwelsch, which is a series of small phrase books which cover tips of culture, a dictionary, grammar, and phrase book all in one. And so some of the endangered or minority languages which are featured in the Kauderwelsch series include, but are not limited to, the Sorbian languages, not surprisingly, Nahuatl, Wakota, Mayan languages, the Sami languages, Greenlandic, Faroese, many languages of Sub-Saharan Africa, again, many minority languages within Europe, including all of the Celtic languages except for Manx. And so that's truly a fantastic resource. A lot of them are very, very well written, extremely thorough, and really good in helping you launch your language plane, as it were. Okay, omniglot.com. There's a list of resources in the language. And so if you go on that website and you actually look for the language that you want to learn, you'll actually see a huge collection of resources that will usually be free websites at the very bottom. Go ahead and use them. And also, if you are making a resource for a language that you speak that happens to be an endangered or minority language, share it with omniglot.com, and they'll actually make sure to publicize it accordingly. And so that's extremely helpful. Probably the one place that I would really begin. Memrise, Anki, and other spaced repetition programs with user-made content. This is extremely important because often some people can get one book in one area of the world, but other people in most areas of the world can't actually get that book. But maybe the person who actually does have that book really needs to memorize a lot of things. And so he or she may actually take a lot of the sentences, vocabulary from that book, and then put it into Memrise, which is good news for you, because that means that with Memrise or Anki or any of its extended family, you can actually learn various words and phrases and grammatical constructions in very rare languages on these websites that you can't find anywhere else. And so make sure to go ahead and check that. University libraries, again, if you do have access to them, it's a huge boon. I've had some of my friends having had access to the Columbia University Library, and then often in many cases, I'm just simply shocked with the variety of languages for which they can find resources. I don't know, where did you get that? And so that's extremely fascinating. Transparent Language with a library account that's actually free. And so they provide a lot of resources from how do I put it, the indigenous languages of Canada and the United States. They really do have a lot of those. Not also to mention languages from throughout the world, both among the global languages, small national languages, and many endangered languages that you probably didn't know exist. And so not only that, a lot of the phrases which they provide are extremely useful, very poignant, and also ones that you will be needing, very much like some other apps that provide useless sentences, and you know who I'm thinking of, but I'm not going to name them. Okay. Mango Languages also has some offerings, primarily in the Celtic languages, also with Yiddish, and a little bit more on a basic level with Tuvan, and I believe also some other languages of the Russian Federation, if I recall correctly. That's also important as well. That's also free with a library account. You can also search for various libraries that have subscriptions to Transparent or Mango Languages. I really, really laud their effort in language preservation, and I really hope that they keep it up. Growthspade.com is a fantastic dictionary, and it actually not only provides dictionaries, but also cross-translated sentences, which is extremely helpful. One thing that to keep in mind is the fact that even if they don't have a word translated, you'll actually see for example, various other sentences mostly provided by missionaries in religious materials. We're going to get into that in a moment. One side, for example, Tuvaluan, and the other side, those same sentences in English. And so if you're having trouble finding the words that you want, then you can actually use the sentences and actually determine what they mean via a process of deductive reasoning. Freelang.com, a free dictionary with a client that you can download and access online on both phones and on desktop computers. That actually has, you can install word lists from dozens upon dozens of languages in the entire planet. Some of these languages I've literally never heard of before and are so unbelievably rich, and many of the dictionaries are extremely well written and very thorough. Also, if you have trouble finding native speaker audio at first, try searching for music or tutorials on YouTube. Otherwise, the Jesus film from 1979 is dubbed into more languages than any other in human history. In nearly, I kid you not, 1/6 of the languages on the entire planet in its offerings. And so Ari in Beijing, a well-known YouTube star, very famous in China, he actually interviewed me a while ago, and he actually called me the language geek's language geek. But I really, really, really appreciate the fact that he called me that. But interestingly, when I really look through the languages in which the Jesus film has been dubbed, I can't even recognize a good 7/8 of languages on that list. And so they're extremely thorough. And it just simply is mind-boggling exactly how linguistically diverse the planet really is when you just simply take a step back from it all. Lastly, if you can't find any resources, ask online Facebook groups, Reddits, forums, or just wait. Most materials can and will come out in the future. And even for endangered languages, the material, both free and paid, will continue to grow. The primary goals from there on out is the same as learning any other language. Learn how to pronounce, learn basic phrases, learn how to put sentences together with the verbs to be, to want, to have, etc. And so that's of primary importance. Okay, next up, what makes an endangered language different from learning a global language like German or Mandarin Chinese, or a safe national language like Bulgarian or Somali? The technological usage can be scant or non-existent. For a language like Breton, there is Mozilla Firefox, Facebook, and Minecraft available with the Breton interface, but not all endangered languages are as well endowed, often because corporations really want to minimize translation costs. And this is another pattern I've really noticed. And so some technological services use crowdin.com in order to localize things. And these are volunteer translators who often can request that their language is offered, and then as a result, then translators can really get to work, and then voila, you end up with translation in Breton without having had to pay any money for that. And so that's really one thing that's noteworthy. But often for many big corporations, not everyone is really willing to do that. And so one result of this is that Minecraft is available in Cornish, although I think it's an incomplete translation. Facebook also has a Klingon interface. Content online may also be more scarce And that's more relevant for endangered languages from the developing world. Because, yes, while, for example, many of the minority languages of Europe may be endangered, many of the people who use them primarily will have access to technological devices and will be using them, may be encouraged to actually keep the language alive by using them in the technological sphere. But concerning various areas that may not have as strong of an access to technology, you may not be able to find written samples of it as easily. One thing that I've really noticed, for example, is that Cornish, despite the fact that it is significantly a very small language in the United Kingdom, actually is more readily available online than many official languages of small Pacific Island countries, which I find fascinating. Fewer opportunities to meet native speakers in person, depending on where you live, but with apps and the internet, this may change completely, especially if you live in a big city. And so as a result, with apps really ensuring that other people get to meet and chat to each other, the fact is that you may not actually really need to meet people face-to-face in order to genuinely get the variety of practice that really comes with those same benefits. Fewer resources, which means you'll have to use deductive reasoning and learning from context a lot more often. In some cases, where you may have grammar books, some phrases, and a dictionary, but may not have dedicated textbooks available for you, you may have to make your own phrase book. And so when I learned Tuvaluan in the spring, this is precisely what I intend to do. Okay, what traps do learners of endangered languages fall in, and how do you avoid them? 1, relying too much on language learning materials rather than using the language in real life. This is extremely important, and it's one that language learners across the board tend to be very guilty of. And so the fact is that the language learning materials do not by themselves make you fluent. You are supposed to use that as your launch pad in order to genuinely access the many varieties of content that really that are accessible to native speakers. And so that's primary important. Don't keep on rehearsing the same variety of books or for learners again and again when you can, in any capacity, engage with the language online in a way that a native speaker would. 2, not keeping up your motivation or getting discouraged, including from other people. Like, yes, I've had some people like tell me, oh, why do you bother with such useless languages? Look, you deserve the life you want. You deserve to learn the languages you want. Be strong in yourself. I believe in you. And also, yet again, I think that really people who do things differently are always great heroes. And so this is me telling you that you deserve to have the endangered language of your dreams in your life. Concerning motivation, you'll really need to develop a dynamic relationship with the language, with that culture, and really keep it fresh. And we're going to, in the next few points, we're going to cover that. Relying too much on passive forms of learning and neglecting active forms. And so this means that, for example, maybe you're only reading or maybe you're only listening. But if you don't use the language actively, this can be fatal, and you can actually burn out very, very quickly and choose to abandon the language entirely. And so make sure to use the language actively. You can definitely employ your YouTube channel if you have one in order to do that. You could also use the Huggins International 30-Day Speaking Challenge, and you could also use a variety of italki teachers or what have you. There are plenty of ways with which to engage with a language actively, regardless of how many native speakers or not you may have met over the course of your life. Not using every available resource. And so when I was interviewed by Luke Truman of Full-Time Fluency a while ago, I think it was like about a week and a half ago, I spoke of a theory of mine called the chessboard theory. And so this really states that if you are playing a game of chess and you just simply keep your rook and your knight and your bishop sitting in the corner the whole time, your chances for victory are nearly going to disappear. And so what you really need to do in order to win at chess or to win at language learning is use every single available resource. Not only that, you also have to realize each individual resource's strengths and then play to them accordingly. And so my most successful language missions have been those of which I've actively drawn together a lot of resources together and used each one in accordance with its strength, and thereby created a web with which to engage the language. And so you really need to create that web as well. Going to the same materials, even for native speakers, over and over again. This is a big one. Possibly if you just simply watch the same television show episode once over the course of 5 times, and then possibly repeat repeat it over a year, yeah, it might actually help you with your sentence structure in many cases. But yeah, you might be at a risk of only being able to talk about that one show or that one podcast and not much else. And so you really need to vary your materials. And this is true for language learning in general, but given the scarcity, comparative scarcity of materials for many endangered languages, some people tend to get really, really attached to just a handful of things. And these worlds of endangered languages are actually a lot richer than you realize. And so you have to resist that temptation. Not playing with the language enough and engaging it with a wide variety of activities. And so it's a bit, building a relationship with the language is a bit like building a relationship with a person in many regards. And so one thing you really need to do is that if you're raising a small child, you can't just simply play the exact same game every single time, although maybe they might like that. You really need to mix it up with a significant variety of games and actually engage with the child with in a number of different emotional levels and a variety of games. In the same way, you need to keep the relationship with your languages, and especially an endangered language, extremely fresh by ensuring that you can manage to employ it in a number of different functions. Next up, can learning an endangered language as an outsider help keep the language alive? And the short answer is yes. So there is a fallacy among some academics that think that learners like you and me can't do anything to stem language death, that it is secondary to focusing efforts on the community where the dying language is spoken or would be spoken. But the truth of the matter is that every little bit helps. And one reason for that is actually because of groups like Polyglots the Community. The polyglot communities online are getting closer. And given how few people learn rarer languages, one mention or one video of one language is enough to inspire plenty of learners. And so I made Memrise's first ever Greenlandic course, and now there's a devoted category to it on Memrise in the desktop category. And so many more Greenlandic courses on Memrise have also sprung up since, and I've inspired many people to investigate Greenland and the Greenlandic language in more depth. And so you can do the same with any other smaller language, no matter who you are, and just engage with the language online, mention it in conversations when appropriate, and then curious people will ask questions. Sometimes I've encountered, for example, Bretons who only speak English and French with no knowledge of Breton. While I paused my studies of Breton for the time being to focus on Fijian, where I may be in Fiji this summer, I've caused a lot of these non-speakers of Breton to reconsider their heritage for a moment. And some people are saying, you know, this Jewish guy from Connecticut has no interest in Breton and no heritage in Brittany, but still has a deep enough interest in my language in order to learn it. Maybe I should consider doing the same thing. And so I've also encountered, for example, many Jewish people, Ashkenazi Jewish people in the United States who don't speak Yiddish, have never learned it. And then sometimes they've actually encountered some people who are not Jewish, and then they've actually learned Yiddish to fluency. And yet again, that also has the same variety of effect. And you can also create that variety of warmth and curiosity in other people. Okay, lastly, ways you can help preserve endangered languages even if you have no intention to learn them. The most important thing is don't refer to languages as useless. This is extremely important, and tying on with this idea is the idea that every language has value, that we are all cultures that have shaped the kaleidoscope of the human experience. We deserve to be there, we deserve to share our stories, and we deserve to be appreciated, loved, and studied. Realize that our diversity makes us human and that conformity makes us mechanical. And what's more, there is an ongoing battle for domination between humans and corporations. And so in a lot of this sphere of big money and late capitalism, there is this idea, for example, that only what is big or useful or making money should be considered and that smaller things should not. And so one result of this is that we've had some people who have really bought into this significantly. But the truth is that for most of our history, we have realized that every single human being has sanctity, has value, and also has stories and is infinitely powerful. And the same is also true with cultures. What's more, I think that there is the fact that our humanity constantly stands challenged by a lot of this worldview of make more money, get more stuff, harvest more resources, etc. And a lot of that is really contained in the ancient wisdom of many of our cultures, many of which are dying out. And so I've noticed that with each new language that I've studied, that I've become closer to the human spirit. I've really noticed exactly how much human beings have suffered throughout time, how much they continue to suffer, and also how similar we really all are everywhere. And so in that case, endangered language learning can actually help save the world, and actually, in a sense that the fact is that with many of these smaller countries and really showing that they deserve to exist, we realize that it's just simply not a utilitarian existence in which things are just simply judged as useful or not, and the useless things, or things to be useless, and scare quotes, are tossed out. That's a dangerous path to really fall down. And in coming times, we'll have to make a choice. We can either choose to be humans, which all of us band together, tell stories, savor jokes, tell wisdom, share with each other, realize that all of us is sacred and has value. We can either choose that, or we can choose the ideology of big money, but we cannot and will not have both. And so to some degree, language learners are at the forefront of saving the world. And I hope that people like you and I will continue to save the world and inspire all of us. Thank you very much. Okay, so here I have the contact information. And so my Facebook account is facebook.com/zog zich niet, which means don't worry about it in Yiddish. I have my email address, also Twitter, blog, and my YouTube channel as well. Feel free to go ahead and subscribe to any of these. And also, lastly, any varieties of questions about endangered language learning, I am glad to go ahead and take them. And so, do we have any questions at all? Go ahead. But also, if you don't have any questions, I'll take that as a compliment, because sometimes, as a teacher myself, I know that sometimes, I have people, yeah, you explain that really, really clearly. I don't think I have anything that confuses me. But if there's anything that you're just curious about, definitely go ahead and let me know. I'll stay here for a number of minutes. Or I could tell jokes. Jokes are good. All right. Well, in any case, it doesn't seem that people are typing comments in that regard. So in that case, I will go ahead and bid a farewell. And so here is, to conclude, a sign I made for an environmental march last year with Kiribati and Tuvalu on the right and the left, respectively. And so we have a choice to either let our cultures die or to actually keep them alive. And in many cases, the struggle to really keep these cultures alive versus to let them die is really bound up with our humanity and also our compassion. And I hope that all of us get to choose compassion. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you have a good day. And I am always ready to answer your question or assist you in your language learning journeys in every regard. And I hope that this has been fulfilling and meaningful for you, and I wish you the best of luck in all of your journeys. Thank you very, very much.